So we're back and we're diving into the topic of communication because we have a lot more opportunity to communicate. We want to make sure that we're communicating in healthy ways with one another. And it's just another skill set that we can develop in this season where we're paused. And our communication can reflect God and God's character as well. I love the passage when Jonah gets frustrated with God in the Old Testament and doesn't want to go tell the Ninevites that they're sinning or that there might be judgment coming, because he goes back to God's character and says, "You're a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and relenting from disaster." So when we look at the character of God, we want that understanding and the gospel understanding of communication to permeate our hearts and to change the way that we communicate with one another.
Yeah, Jesus said in Luke 6:45, it's out of the heart that the mouth speaks. And so there's a reality that our hearts are what reflect and determine the words that come out. In Ephesians 4:29, Paul says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as good for building up as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." So as those who have received God's grace, we want to be people whose speech reflects God's grace. And like he says in here, it's meant to build up. So we want to be the type of people who use our words to build up rather than tear down. And so what we want to do is look at a little tool today that I think can be very helpful in helping us have the type of communication that we want to have. Because I think all of us would say, hey, we would like to have communication that is gracious, that builds up, that doesn't tear down. But a lot of us have never had that modeled for us. We don't know how to do it. And so we keep on bumping into walls in our communication and we don't understand how to get better at it. So we're going to illustrate this through some pictures here.
So it's important to know that when we're communicating, and this is helpful to see in a diagram, when we're communicating, I might think that I'm communicating something. I might feel like I'm clear in the way that I'm communicating something. And yet there's some hurdles that come with healthy communication in that, you know, the conversation that I just had with a coworker or the fight that I just had with my kid, the past experiences that I've had in relationships or my family of origin might bring certain attitudes or insecurities or filters or hurdles to that healthy communication here. And so it might come out in my body language, in my tone of voice, in the types of words that I choose to use. And those things might alter the way that my message is heard.
And I am going to receive the message through filters that I have as well. So I've got my own day that's happened and a marker that doesn't work. So I've got my own day that's happened. I've got my own family of origin. I was driving home and the guy in front of me was a real jerk. And so I'm angry and frustrated coming in. And so I've got all of my own experiences. And communication is two ways, right? It's what the person says, what I hear. And so the only way to kind of break this down and get to really understand one another is to close this loop. So to create a feedback loop. And so I have to explain to the person who's talking to me what I've heard them say. And so do we want to demonstrate this, Amanda? How do we want to do this?
We typically do when we met with couples with premarital counseling or marriage counseling. We demonstrate what this might look like. So I might communicate, you know what, I would really like to spend some more time together. I feel like we've been really busy and haven't really made time just for the two of us. So I was wondering if we could spend some time just doing something the two of us, and that would make me feel like really loved and appreciated and connected.
Now, if I am communicating poorly here, or I've got a lot of filters that it's come through, I might hear this as, "Oh, you don't think I spend enough time with you, you're super needy, I think we've got a problem here." The proper way for me to do this is to make I statements and say, "I hear you saying that we've been really busy lately and that you are feeling a little disconnected from me and you'd like to spend more time with me." Am I hearing you right on that?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. And so by affirming that, by hearing that message coming back, it lets me know that I've communicated what I intended to communicate. He's heard that in a way that I wanted him to hear that.
Yeah.
And then that allows us to jump into that conversation like, well, you know, it's really busy. Could we do it another time? Could we set a regular date night? Wherever that conversation happens to lead. But the first part is just to make sure that you're communicating and hearing one another well.
Yeah, that what has been spoken is what has actually been heard. And when you hear the other person repeat back, you can say, actually, that's not quite what I'm trying to say to you. I think there's a blockage here. This is oftentimes why people are like, how come when we go to a counselor and talk, it feels like we can talk, but as soon as it's just the two of us, we're running into the same wall all the time? Well, it's because what the counselor is doing is they're mediating your conversation to try and make sure that what is being said is what is being heard. They're trying to take all those filters out. And this is really doing that in the day-to-day. Now, there's one thing that is crucial in this that if you're communicating, you need to do, and that's to speak I statements, not you statements. When we say, you did this, you did that, it's like a verbal finger pointing at the person, and it immediately makes the person defensive because it puts blame and it puts up walls. So instead, what you need to do is you need to take ownership of what you're communicating and say, hey, here's my experience. Here's what I'm feeling. Not here's what you are doing. Here's what you need to fix. But here's my reality. And I want you to understand and to see a little bit into what I'm experiencing, what my world is right now.
And I think it's really important as well to allow grace in this conversation. So if through your filters, you're hearing what I'm doing isn't good enough, you don't appreciate the time I'm putting in, nothing's ever good enough for you. If that's what you're hearing and feeling, that might reflect, again, some of these filters. It might reflect your heart in that day.
Oftentimes it reflects your past relationships and past experiences.
And so by bringing that message back, if that comes back to me, not what I intended to say, that's where I can back up and be slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love like our God. Like James says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to get angry, because of our sinful human nature will break this down so fast. And so by going through this, if something comes back, I'm like, whoa, I didn't mean that. That's not what I said. Yeah. Then that allows me to say, okay, one, how can I say this in a different way so that he can hear what it is that I'm meaning to say? And if I know that I've communicated it, but it's obvious that he has some filters here that are interrupting the way that he's hearing that message, then I can say, whoa, are you okay? Yeah. That's not at all what I meant to say, but it just seems like there's something going on. So instead of getting mad and defensive and jumping to anger, by completing this loop and checking in on one another, we're ensuring that what I'm meaning to say is being heard. We're able to talk about whatever the issue is at hand and not allow it to fall apart and go into that I'm hurt, I'm going to hurt you battle that often can lead to conflict just because of all sorts of other issues that play into that.
Yeah, I mean, really what we're trying to do is give you a tool to speak the truth in love. And for both Amanda and I, this is not just theoretical, like this is a journey that we continue to be on and have been on. And you know, my struggle when we first started dating was I was a truth speaker who didn't add a lot of love and compassion and empathy a lot of times into my truth. And so I would think that I was being very direct and very blunt, and that's the way you should communicate. And I remember a time where you went out and bought a dress that maybe wasn't my favorite dress, and we were about 8 months into our relationship. She was really excited to come and try it on for me, and my truth, I would say this was my truth in the moment. I said, man, that is an ugly dress, but my truth was not shaped in any way by love, and you ran off crying, and I also had to deal with your angry older sister.
And I had to learn, I'm somebody who's much more emotional by nature. And I had to learn that sometimes I was just letting emotions come out, but I was not being very clear or intentional about what I was trying to communicate. Or I was communicating and like allowing my emotions to kind of barf all over the place. And he wasn't hearing the message that I was intending to receive. He was just getting overwhelmed with the emotions. And so I had to figure out, how do I best communicate with him? Logic, reason, getting to the point, getting to those facts and details works really well with him. I have a child who's much more emotional, and I need to hit his heart before I can get to his head. And so again, part of communicating means honoring and respecting both people, not assuming that the way you communicate something is right, but saying in the end, what's most important is healthy communication, so that we have a healthy relationship that is honoring the way that God made each of us, which means we have different strengths and we communicate in different ways.
At the end of the day in communication, what we all want to know is to understand that we've been understood and heard, because that's what allows us to feel loved. And within that, we want to be truthful, yes, but we want we want all of that to be covered in grace in a way that reflects Jesus well. And we ended our last video in Colossians 3, and I think that's a good way to end here too, that whatever we would do in word or deed would reflect well on the name of Jesus, and that includes our communication.